that mist-slick dirt road outside Bozeman that morning, I saw him a man dragging a rain-soaked rope, the other end tied to a Doberman pup, almost stripped of fur. Its skin was cracked and mottled its belly, distended its eyes, cloudy and barely blinking. A soaked scrap of paper swung from the collar. "He's no good." When I shouted, he turned. His face was as empty as stone. "Don't touch it. If you save it, you'll pay." The wind hit my face, a sting so cold it burned, but something inside me flared hotter. I'd pulled people from flames before, but I'd never seen cruelty burn like that. I moved closer, slipped the rope free, my voice shaking with anger. "If it dies because of you, I'll make you pay." The dog sucked air in shallow, desperate gasps in my hands, and I knew then the real fight was only beginning. I held the wheel until mud and slush flew. My heart hammered like a sledge. Ranger, the name I gave him in my head until someone could give him a real one, was wrapped in my wet coat, his small body trembling against my chest. The clinic smelled of damp of iron, and of that thick, sick scent that rises off a body left to rot skin bare in places, black-red flakes hanging in sheets, eyes like uncut gems clouded over. His belly was blown tight as a drum, the skin shining liver. I thought immediately. Bloat. No food for days. The kind of damage you hear about from horror cases in holding pens, bad food parasites, filthy water. The clinic door slammed open before I could knock. Claire was there, hair tied back, eyes sharp as a blade. She didn't ask many questions. In Gallatin Creek, she'd seen enough to know long questions waste the time you don't have. "Put him on the table," she said. Her voice was enough to make me set Ranger down, and I felt my hands go oddly light, like I'd just laid something down and taken on something new. The steel table was cold. Harsh white light lit every abrasion on his skin. Claire leaned in, checked the mucous membranes of his mouth, and shook her head. Pale tongue, weak pulse, fluid in the abdomen. And look at this skin demodex, long-standing, liver in large signs of failure. She rattled it off, calm and clinical, the way a doctor does after seeing hundreds of the same thing. Not because she was numb, because she needed me to stay awake. I remembered the steadiness in her voice the first time we met, composed and without mercy for excuses. "We have to drain the fluid, start IVs, give strong antibiotics, and clean the skin. If we can, we'll operate to relieve the abdominal pressure if his breathing won't hold." She looked me straight in the eye. "Are you staying?" I looked at Ranger. His eyes cracked open and turned toward me like a man hearing his name. My chest tightened. "I'm staying," I said as much to myself as to her. I held the promise I'd made the day I put on the firefighter's jacket. Never leave a life that needs you. It's a simple rule until the cost shows up. Claire got to work. The clinic became mechanical, the clink of stainless clamps, the pop of medicine bottles, the soft whir of a suction device. I sank into a chair in the corner, hands on my head, eyes fixed on the little dog under the lamp. Every beep on the monitor made my heart jump. I kept wondering about the man by the oak tree. Had he done this out of cruelty, or something worse? How could anyone think dumping a living thing like trash was normal? That question lodged in my skull like a hook. Claire drained the fluid from his belly. A yellow foul liquid filled the syringe. She squinted as it drew out. Smell heavy inflammation. If we don't act, the pressure will crush his lungs. He'll suffocate long before the liver has a chance to recover. She turned to me. "You understand what that means?" I nodded. The man's words, "you'll pay," echoed cold in my ears. But the little steady beep from the monitor was its own counsel act now, or live with regret forever. Claire prepared anesthesia. "We'll operate to reduce the pressure. Lessen whatever's causing a bowel obstruction if there is one. He's weak, but if the heart holds, we have a shot." She leaned down, voice almost a whisper aimed at the dog. "Hang on, little one." I put my hand on his neck and felt that fragile thrum, like a whisper in the night. When the needle pierced my skin, I held my breath. The light over Claire's brow gleamed like a cold lighthouse. I thought of the house fire, the helplessness of watching a life slip away. I would not repeat that with a dog. I was ready to pay whatever the price. Today, pay was a word without a definition, but one thing was certain: I wouldn't turn my back. The monitor beeped on. The pulse was still weak. Claire laid a hand on my shoulder, a quick allying press. "Get ready," she said. "If his heart drops, be ready to compress." I didn't answer. I stood and stepped closer to the table, staring into Ranger's cloudy eyes. In them, I saw a challenge: save him, and this was no longer just about one dog. The clinic door cracked again, and a cold draft rolled in, a reminder that the world outside still contained people who would walk away. Under the naked lamp, though, there was only one thought in my head: do everything I can to keep that small breath going. I'd never been in a quieter room. Only the steady thump of the monitor and Claire's breathing, even deep focused. I held Ranger's head, gloved hands pressed to his skin, feeling the rough, fever-hot hide under my palms like an ember. Ether antiseptic, the metallic tang of blood, they hung in the air, thick as smoke. Each soft beep was a prayer. Claire moved with quick, decisive hands. "Heart's holding for now," she said, eyes never leaving the incision. "I can see it: bowel obstruction, lots of bile." God. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I looked down. Inside that small abdomen was the kind of chaos only abandonment creates: plastic fragments, string-clotted, moldy food. A body not yet 3 months old that had been forced to endure like a tortured soldier. "How did he make it this far?" I asked. Claire's voice snagged. "From the pens, dirty kennels. No meds, no food, no hygiene. Demodex on the skin, liver, poisoned, internal infection. When the liver swells, fluid pours into the belly. I don't know what miracle kept him until you found him." I was quiet. The words on that scrap, "He's no good," echoed in my head. Someone had written that like a verdict, flat and absolute. Not worth saving. Did they really believe that? Claire looked up. Sweat beaded on her forehead, though the room was stone cold. "I'm cleaning. When I say hold, don't let his head drop." I nodded. In that moment, I understood the truth of holding a life. It was not only Claire's skill, it sat in my hands in a stubborn will not to let go. I watched Ranger, hairless, in places scarred, breathing each breath like a blade. Maybe he didn't know anything, but his tiny body fought death by pure instinct. And me, a man who'd pulled people out of flames, I found myself praying I could save a single life from the colder cruelty of people. Then the monitor hiccuped. A beat missed. The tone stretched. I felt my heart fall into my stomach. "No," Claire whispered. "Don't." She cranked up the oxygen and moved like a machine. "Compression's light," she barked. I placed 2 fingers on that small chest and pushed in rhythm with her count. 1, 2, 3. The air in the room thickened. I could hear my sweat drip onto Claire's scrubs. She lowered her voice to something like prayer. "Come on, baby. Don't go. 1 beat, 2 beats, then beep, beep." The heart came back. I exhaled as if I'd been pulled from underwater. Claire dropped her head slightly and said softly, "Still weak." But he didn't give up. An hour later, she sewed the incision, wiped the blood clean, and tucked Ranger into the warming box. A yellow light washed over the small wrapped shape. Breathe shallow, but steady. Claire leaned against the wall, exhausted but sure. If he makes it through tonight, he has a chance. He needs meds time and someone who won't abandon him again. I pulled a chair up close to the heater and sat down. "I'm staying." She looked at me for a long moment, fatigue and trust mixed in her eyes. "Do you understand what you're taking on? That man won't let this go." I gave a small, dry smile. I know fire, Claire. I just haven't learned cold. She said nothing more. We sat in the silence with only the faint breaths and the steady rain tapping the glass. Outside Montana, night lay heavy like an old cold blanket. I glanced at Ranger one last time before letting my eyes close on the wooden chair, his cloudy brown eyes half open as if trying to say something. A promise. A small message. I didn't know if the morning would still bring snow, but I knew this. I wouldn't leave that room until that little breath was strong enough to stand up to the world that had turned its back. That night I couldn't sleep. Nobody in that room could. The monitor kept its steady cadence beep, beep, sinking to a rhythm that felt like it belonged to Ranger's tiny chest. Claire's breath beside me was slow, deep-focused. I cupped Ranger's head with gloved hands. His hide under my palms was rough and fever-hot like an ember you're afraid to let go. Ether antiseptic. The metallic tang of blood they hung together heavy in the air. Every soft beep was a prayer. Claire moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who doesn't waste motion. Heart's stable, she murmured, never taking her eyes off the stitch line. I can see it, bowel obstruction, lots of bile. God. Her voice fell to almost nothing. I looked down inside that small cavity lay. The chaos abandonment makes plastic shards, string-clotted rotten food. A body not yet 3 months old, already battered like a soldier who'd been through torture. How did he hang on this long, I asked. Claire's voice caught. From the kennels, dirty pens, no meds, no food, no cleaning. Demodex on the skin, toxic liver, systemic infection. When the liver swells, fluid fills the belly. I don't know what miracle kept him until you found him. Silence closed around me. He's no good. The words on that soaked scrap kept replaying in my head. Someone had written that like a verdict, not worth saving. Could people really believe that Claire looked up? Sweat stood on her brow, though the room felt like stone. I'm cleaning. When I say hold, don't let his head drop. I nodded. In that instant, I understood holding a life isn't only Claire's skill, it's in my hands, in a stubborn refusal to let go. I watched Ranger, nearly hairless, scarred, breathing each breath as if it cut through him. Maybe he didn't understand, but his little body fought on by blind instinct. Me, a man who'd pulled people from flames I'd never wanted so badly to keep one small life from the colder cruelty of other people. Then the monitor hiccuped. A beat missed. The tone stretched. I felt my stomach drop. No, Claire whispered. Don't. She cranked the oxygen and moved like a machine. Light compressions, she barked. I placed my fingers on that tiny chest and pressed in time with her count. 1, 2, 3. The room thickened. I could hear sweat fall onto Claire's scrubs. Her voice went soft, almost a prayer. Come on, little one. Don't leave us. 1 beat, 2 beats, then beep, beep. The heart came back. I let out a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding. Claire dropped her head quietly, still weak, but he didn't quit. An hour later, she stitched the incision closed, wiped the last blood away, and tucked Ranger into the warming box. The yellow light pooled over the small wrapped shape. Breathe, shallow, but steady. Claire leaned against the wall, exhausted and sure. If he makes it through tonight, he has a chance. He needs meds time and someone who won't abandon him again. I pulled a chair up to the heater and sat. I'm staying. She studied me for a long moment, fatigue and trust mixed in her eyes. You know what you're taking on. That man won't let this go. I gave a small, crooked smile. I know fire, Claire. I just haven't learned cold. She said nothing more. We sat in the hush, the rain ticking on the window, the monitor's steady pulse. Then through the fogged glass, a stranger's headlights swept across the yard and died. No engine, no door. Just a light that cut the night and vanished. Claire caught the change in my face. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I went to the window. Snow clung to the glass and turned the headlight into a diffuse ring like animal eyes, watching from the dark. "Maybe someone lost," Claire said, but she sounded unsure. I stepped outside. The cold hit like a blade. The smell of frozen diesel and smoke stung the air. Fresh tire tracks scored the snow running north toward the abandoned camps on the valley's edge, the place where I'd met Frank Delaney. When I came back in, Claire stood at the door, robe drawn tight. "You think it's him?" "Maybe." "Ethan, you should let the police handle it." I looked at her. "Which cops?" "In a place like this, people won't even tell on a man with a gun. I've lived in Montana long enough to know justice only comes if you drag it into the light yourself." Claire was quiet, then sighed. "At least wait for morning. I'll help pull records from his old camp. Don't do anything stupid." I nodded, but I knew I'd already decided. Ranger stirred when I stepped back to the table. His cloudy eyes flicked to me like he understood I was going. I crouched down and rested my hand lightly on his head. "I'll be back, kid. You pulled through one fire. I'll put out the other one out there, I promise." Outside, the snow began to fall harder, white on white, covering the new tire marks until they blurred and faded. I stood there a moment with a cold dread crawling up my spine, the feeling that tonight was only the start, and that the real fight wasn't confined to this room. Claire laid a hand on my shoulder. "If you go, bring him back alive. Both of you." I looked at Ranger, even breath chest rising and falling, then walked out. The clinic door closed behind me, leaving the steady beeps as the only sound. That rhythm, a heartbeat, was a reminder. As long as there's breath, the fight isn't over. Dawn hadn't fully broken when I left the clinic. The sky over Bozeman hung in a sheet of silver gray, sharp and cold as needles. Frost clung to the hood of the truck. Every step I took across the lot cracked like brittle glass. I carried nothing but a flashlight, an old camera, and the leather bag that had followed me through years of firefighting. The dirt road leading toward the outskirts of Gallatin Valley was empty. Each time the truck rolled forward, pale fog curled up around the tires, swallowing what little I could see. I remembered Claire's words. "If you go looking for answers, come back alive with them." Easy to say. But from the moment I saw that strange set of headlights outside the clinic last night, I knew what was hiding in the dark wasn't just cruelty. It was a system someone wanted to keep buried. 10 miles out, I spotted a collapsed wooden fence along the road. Behind it, old barns slouched under rusted tin roofs. The faded sign above the gate read, "Delaney Feed Supply." Tilted. Peeling. No mistake. This was his place, and maybe still was. I cut the engine and stepped out. The air was thick with iron and oil and something else. Something foul like rot trapped too long under ice. I followed a narrow path behind the barn, the flashlight beam slicing through the fog until it hit a pile of tangled chains half buried in snow. Paw prints dotted the ground, mixed with deep tire tracks from a heavy truck. Then a sound. A small cry, faint like breath slipping through a cracked door. I stopped. Beneath a bent sheet of tin, a smaller dog than Ranger lay curled tight, one hind leg cinched with wire, the flesh around it swollen and seeping. "Jesus," I choked out. It was still breathing barely. Footsteps behind me. I turned, sweeping the light across the snow. Frank Delaney stood there, worn leather jacket, cigarette caught between two fingers, that hollow smirk curling one side of his face. "You just don't listen, do you?" he said. "I told you to stay out of it." I tightened my grip on the flashlight pulse, kicking hard in my throat. "What are you doing to these dogs?" He shrugged. "Not your problem. Nobody wants this trash. I'm just cleaning up. I've seen your kind of clean. One of them was hanging from a tree when I found him. I saved him. And if I have to save every last one in this hellhole, I will." Frank gave a dry chuckle, but his eyes were sharp, knife sharp. You think you're a hero? In this town, nobody cares. I've bred dogs here for 30 years, no cops ever came knocking. And you, Ethan Cole." He dragged on the cigarette, exhaling smoke that hung like frost. "You're just a curious man who'll vanish in the snow." The words slid out cold and flat as winter wind. I took one step closer, just enough to see what hid behind him. Rows of stacked metal cages, dozens of eyes glimmering in the dark. No barking, only the wet rasp of labored breaths, the faint scrape of claws on steel. My blood turned to ice. "I'll be back," I said low and steady, with someone who can shut this hell down for good. Frank snorted and flicked the cigarette to the ground. "If you live long enough to come back." I didn't answer. I just looked at him long enough to burn his face into memory, the hollow stare of a man standing among suffering creatures without a flicker of shame. As I stepped through the rusted gate, one of the dogs whimpered. The sound hit me square in the spine. Back at the truck, my hands trembled. A thin layer of new snow coated the windshield, reflecting my face, and for a moment I didn't see the firefighter I once was. I saw someone about to ignite a different kind of fire. I started the engine. Behind me, the Delaney compound shrank into the fog, swallowed by silence. Only the wind remained, whistling through the iron cages, carrying with it the softest cry for help I would never forget. I came back to the clinic just as dusk settled. Ranger was more awake. Those cloudy eyes had cleared a fraction, though his frame was still nothing more than skin draped over bone. Claire was changing his bandage, the warm yellow lamp pooling over her hands. I stood there for a few seconds, speechless. Something in the air, antiseptic dog fur, stale coffee, reminded me this fight wasn't over. "What did you find?" she asked without looking up. "I found him. And the others," I said. "A lot of them. Locked up, starved. The whole compound behind his place is still operating." Claire stopped, looked me dead in the eye. "You went alone. I had no choice." "And what were you going to do? Call the police?" I let out a dry laugh. "He's got people. I saw trucks with the local hauling company's logo, probably family. The cops here aren't blind, they just choose not to see." Claire was quiet for a moment, then pulled an old clinic camera from a drawer, the heavy, practical kind. "You'll need clear photos, IDs, and time. I've got a friend who used to work in animal rescue, Melissa. She can help us spread this before he buries the evidence." "Spread it." She nodded. "Justice doesn't come through the front door in places like this, Ethan. It comes from pictures that thousands of people share." She was right. Years of firefighting taught me that light doesn't erase every shadow, but it makes the cruel afraid of being seen. We geared up fresh batteries for the camera, a long zoom lens, a pocket recorder, and my old truck. Ranger watched my every move, his brown eyes holding a thing I could only call trust. We hit Delaney's compound that second night. The sun had slid behind the Bridger Range. I shut the engine off, and we crawled through the rusted fence. The cold cut like needles. Our breath steamed in the dark. Lights from the main house leaked through the slats. A choked barking echoed from the rows of cages. Claire with the camera, me with the flashlight. Every flash caught another piece of the truth. Cramped metal pens, ragged bodies, terrified eyes in the dark. An old shepherd lay still in one pen. Claire knelt and touched its nose. "It's alive," she whispered, and the sound broke into a muffled sob. I had to pull her up and signal silence. A voice came from the main house. Frank's low, hoarse voice threaded with the clank of metal. "Close the west row. Take the 3 weak ones out back." I knew what out back meant. It meant an ending. We slipped away, keeping our distance. I glanced back through the scope and saw him, Frank Delaney, standing among the pens, blood-streaked boots and iron rod in his hand. For a second, the flashlight washed his face clear. I pressed the shutter. One shot, but enough. We got back to the truck with our hearts pounding like drums. Only once we were clear of the compound did Claire let herself breathe. "We've got evidence," she said, voice shaking, "enough to push this into the media." I nodded and started the engine. "Justice won't come from the police here, Claire, but it will come if we know how to make the whole world look." The headlights carved a pale strip through the snowy road. In the back seat, Ranger shifted, resting his head against a thin blanket. I watched him in the rearview mirror and whispered, "You made it, kid. Now we make sure others do too." From that night on, I knew this fight wasn't just mine anymore. The news spread faster than I ever imagined. 3 days after that night, the photo I'd taken Frank Delaney, standing in the middle of those iron cages, surfaced on social media. Claire's friend Melissa, from an animal rescue group in Billings, had sent it to an independent journalist collective. They didn't need my name, only the image. And when it went live, the entire state of Montana erupted. Hundreds of comments, questions piling up like gunfire. Where is this? Who's responsible? Does the county know? Then outrage turned into pressure. Local TV stations started calling the clinic. Claire answered a few questions, her tone calm but unyielding. "We only did what needed to be done. No one has the right to torture a creature weaker than themselves." That night, I went back to my cabin in the woods. The snow had mostly melted, but the air still carried that thick scent of cold. I sat by the window while Ranger lay curled on a blanket near the fire, his eyelids heavy. Every breath he took erased a piece of the past, the rope, the mud, the wind, the cruel laughter. But I knew someone out there wasn't finished. Around midnight, an engine rumbled outside, low, deliberate. Headlights swept through the pines and stopped in front of my door. My chest tightened. I killed the light, pulled Ranger into the corner and gripped my heavy flashlight like a weapon. 3 knocks. "Ethan Cole," Frank's voice, gravelly, cold as steel. "I know who you are, and I know what you've got. Pictures, video, whatever trash you sent out, delete it. I'm giving you one last chance." I opened the door and faced him. The headlights threw his face into a wash of pale yellow. The calm was gone from his eyes, replaced by fear. "I saw your dogs," I said, "and you better pray they live long enough to tell the rest of your story." Frank let out a bitter laugh. "You think that picture's enough to take me down? Around here people survive by staying quiet." Then he lowered his voice almost a whisper. "You wouldn't understand. There are bigger people than me in this." Before I could speak, he stepped back, climbed into his truck. The tires shrieked against the ice, the headlights blinding me for one last second before disappearing into the curve of the road. I stood there cold, crawling up my back, fire burning in my chest. He was afraid not of me, but of the truth that had slipped out of his hands. The next morning, Claire called. "They're investigating Ethan, the rescue group, the press, and even the state vet department. They said if we have more footage or statements, they'll send a team down." "We've got it," I said. "But he won't sit still. What are you thinking? I think if he's planning to bury this, he'll start cleaning up." By late afternoon, that instinct proved right. Melissa called Delaney's compound was being cleared, trucks leaving in the night. We had only hours before the evidence disappeared. I drove to the clinic to pick up Claire. Ranger came too strong enough now to stand on the back seat. The cold wind sliced across my face, but inside burned something hotter, the kind of heat you don't name. Claire glanced over and nodded. "We're not going back to save a few dogs. We're going back to end this." I pressed the gas. On the dirt road, the fading snow caught the amber glow of the setting sun. Ranger leaned into my jacket eyes, steady. That quiet living light in them was a reminder. It was time to return to where it all began, where the rope once swung in the wind, where evil thought it could hide forever. By the time we arrived, dawn was only a pale whisper on the horizon. The fields were draped in fog, and the Delaney compound lay silent like a corpse waiting to be buried. His truck was already parked in front of the kennel's headlights, stabbing through the dark. He really was cleaning up. I cut the engine and signaled for Claire and Melissa to stay close. The wind sliced through us, and the sound of iron chains clinking together echoed like the breath of ghosts. In my hand, the small camera blinked red night vision on. The first footage I captured showed the cages packed tight with dogs, the air thick with filth and blood. Rapid breaths and hollow eyes staring through rusted bars. Then I saw him, Frank Delaney. He was tossing burlap sacks into the back of the truck, and from one of them came a faint muffled whine. "Stop!" I shouted. My voice cracked through the cold air. He turned startled, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that wasn't arrogance. It was fear. "You should leave, Ethan," he growled. "This isn't your business anymore." I lifted the camera. "It's all being recorded. Today you don't get to hide in the dark." He glanced past me, saw Claire and Melissa behind the fence, their phones glowing in their hands. "You don't understand," he stammered, voice breaking. "I wasn't doing this alone." But he didn't get to finish. From beyond the ridge came the shriek of sirens. Blue and red lights cut through the fog like fire. Melissa had called them hours ago. Frank turned to run, but his boot slipped on the frozen mud. He hit the ground hard. When the two officers closed in, I just stood there. No anger, no triumph. Only that old hollow ache I'd seen too many times after fires ruined silence and regret arriving too late. One by one, the officers opened the cages. Flashlights swept across dozens of eyes. Some dogs were too weak to stand, and others trembled, but still managed to lick the rescuer's hands. Claire knelt by a young shepherd, lifting it gently from the pen. Still breathing, she whispered. My throat tightened. Through the truck window, Ranger watched everything. When I opened the door, he barked once, a small trembling sound, but the first since the day I found him. That was enough. He knew. We'd won. 2 weeks later, the compound was sealed. News outlets across the state carried the story. Frank Delaney was charged on multiple counts, and for the first time in years, Bozeman spoke the word justice without a trace of doubt. At the clinic, Ranger had nearly made a full recovery. His coat grew back thick and glossy. His belly flattened, his eyes shone with gentle light. Every morning, he'd circle the yard and stop by my window, waiting for me to pour my coffee, part of his new ritual. Claire would laugh. I've never seen anyone taught to believe in miracles by a dog before. I'd run a hand over Ranger's head and murmur, I didn't save him. He saved what was left of me. On the last night of winter, Claire and I brought supplies to the temporary shelter. The rescued dogs were being slowly adopted out. When I opened one of the cages, a small pup stepped forward and licked my hand. I looked up at Claire, and neither of us spoke. There was only breath life and quiet gratitude shared among beings who didn't need words. Before leaving, I placed a wooden sign at the gate. Every life deserves a second chance. If you've made it this far, if in Ranger's eyes you saw a reflection of yourself in weakness, in loneliness, or in being forgotten, if you still believe compassion can save a world growing colder, subscribe to our channel to help us share stories like this. Comment below. I believe in second chances. And share this video because somewhere out there another Ranger is still waiting to be found before it's too late.